The red light on my console started flashing before I even had time to finish my coffee. I looked up at the main screen of the bridge and my stomach went cold. 3 massive ships had just come out of deep space right on top of our small outpost. They were Vorthan warships. I knew the shape of those hulls from every nightmare I had lived through in the last 3 years. My name is Cale Brooks, and at that moment I was the commanding officer of Outpost Haven, a tiny listening station at the edge of human space with only 60 people and 4 old fighter ships to defend it. I hit the alarm. The siren screamed through the metal halls. I heard boots running and voices shouting as my crew rushed to their stations. My second in command, a sharp young woman named Helen Parker, slid into the seat beside me. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady on the controls. She looked at me and did not need to ask the question. I could see it in her eyes. Do we run or do we stand? We could not run. The outpost had no jump engines. We had been placed here to watch, to listen, and to warn Earth if the Dominion ever came close. For 3 years, we had done that job well. Now the Dominion was here, and we were the only thing standing between them and the 6 human colonies further back in the sector. I picked up the long-range radio. My voice was rough, but I kept it firm. I sent the warning to Earth Command. I told them the Vorthan were in our space. I told them how many ships I saw. I told them the outpost was about to fall. Then I cut the signal because I did not want the last thing my commanders heard to be the sound of us losing. Helen was already calling the fighters to launch. 4 pilots, 4 small ships, against 3 Vorthan cruisers that were each the size of a small city. It was not a fight. It was a delay. But every minute we bought was a minute the colonies behind us could use to get ready. I stood up from my chair and walked to the front of the bridge. Through the thick glass, I could see the enemy ships moving closer. Their hulls were dark green, covered with plates of living armor that shifted and moved like the skin of some giant animal. Blue lights glowed from their weapon ports. They were charging up. They were not even bothering to talk to us. They had not sent a demand, a warning, or a question. They were just going to wipe us out. That was what the Vorthan Dominion always did. For 3,000 years they had ruled most of the galaxy. They found new species and they made them bow. If anyone refused, they burned the world and moved on. They had done this hundreds of times. They thought they were the strongest force in the universe. They thought nothing could hurt them. 3 years ago, they had found us. They had burned a human colony called Kepler 9. 4 million people were lost in a single afternoon. They had sent one word as an explanation. The word meant trimming or pruning, like something you do to a garden. I had lost my younger brother on Kepler 9. His name was Daniel. He was a farmer. He had never held a weapon in his life. He had gone there to grow fruit trees on a world that was warm and gentle. The Vorthan did not care. They melted the surface of that world until nothing was left but black glass. I looked at the 3 ships coming toward my outpost and I felt something strange. It was not fear. The fear had left me a long time ago, on the day the news of Daniel reached me. What I felt now was something colder and harder. It was a kind of quiet readiness. A promise I had made to myself in the dark of my room 3 years ago. Helen touched my arm. She said the fighters were out. I turned back to the screens and watched our 4 tiny ships race toward the enemy. I knew the pilots. Young Marcus Hill, who played guitar in the mess hall every Friday. Old Peter Gray, who had flown transports for 20 years before he volunteered for the Edge. A quiet woman named Ruth Lane who never spoke much but always smiled. And a boy named Oliver Finch, only 19, who had joined last month because his mother had been a nurse on Kepler 9. I watched them fly straight at the giants. For a moment I thought the Vorthan did not even see them. The huge ships kept moving, ignoring the little specks. Then the first blue beam flashed out. Oliver's fighter vanished in a silent white flash. Ruth went next, then Peter. Marcus lasted the longest. He flew under the belly of one cruiser, spinning and dodging, and he put 5 missiles straight into a weapon port before a beam caught him too. The Vorthan ship shook, and a small fire blossomed on its side. Then Marcus was gone, and the 3 cruisers kept coming. 4 minutes. My pilots had bought me 4 minutes. I turned to Helen. I told her to send the evacuation order. We had 2 small lifeboats, enough for 40 of our 60 people. The other 20 would have to stay and run the station until the end so the lifeboats could get far enough away to hide. I told her she was going on one of the boats. She shook her head. She said I needed her on the bridge. I told her that was an order. She stood up straight and looked me in the eye, and she said something I will never forget. She said, "Sir, if I get on that boat, I will spend the rest of my life knowing I ran while my commander stayed. I cannot do that. Please do not ask me to." I did not ask her again. We sent the 40 people who had families, the young ones, the ones with the most life ahead of them. I watched the 2 small boats launch from the underside of the station and shoot off into the dark toward the colonies. The Vorthen saw them. One of the cruisers turned slightly, and I thought my heart would stop. But then the cruiser turned back to us. They had decided the station was the bigger target. They would come back for the boats later. Except I did not plan to let there be a later. I had one last trick. Outpost Haven had been built on top of an old mining asteroid. Deep inside the rock, there were still huge pockets of unstable ore that the miners had never cleared out. 3 years ago, when I took command of this post, I had quietly ordered my engineers to plant charges in those pockets. Not weapons, just old mining explosives. I had never told anyone at Earth Command because I was not sure they would approve. But I had a feeling that one day, we might need to turn our home into something else. I looked at Helen. I told her the plan. Her eyes went wide for 1 second, and then she smiled. It was a small, tired smile, but it was real. She said, "Well, sir, at least we will not go quietly." We sent one last message to Earth. We told them the Vorthen had arrived with 3 capital ships. We told them we were about to engage. We told them to watch the sensor logs from the colonies, because we were going to leave them a gift. Then we waited. The cruisers came in close, almost lazy, almost bored. They thought we were already finished. They wanted to come near enough to use their crew transports to board us and take prisoners, because that was the Vorthen way. They liked to show the galaxy what happened to anyone who stood against them. When the first cruiser was less than a kilometer away, I pressed the button. The asteroid under us did not just explode. It cracked open like a fruit. A huge wave of rock and metal and fire shot out in every direction, and the station rode that wave straight into the lead cruiser. I felt the whole world shake. The glass in front of me turned white. Helen was thrown against her console. I held onto the command chair with both hands, and for a moment I thought we were already dead. Then the white light faded, the screens flickered back on, and I saw what we had done. The lead Vorthen cruiser was broken in half. Its green armor was torn open, and I could see the inside of the ship, dark and smoking. The second cruiser was spinning out of control, half its engines gone. Only the third ship was still in one piece, and it was backing away, confused. Helen laughed. It was a shaky, amazed sound. She said, "Sir, we just killed a Vorthen capital ship with a rock." I looked at the broken enemy ship, and I felt that cold, quiet thing inside me grow a little stronger. I said, "Helen, this is only the beginning." And somewhere far away, on a world I had never seen, a Vorthen admiral was about to receive a report that would change everything. A report that said, for the first time in 3,000 years, a human had punched back. The third Vorthen cruiser pulled away and jumped into deep space before we could hit it again. That was a problem. That ship was going to run home and tell its masters what had happened here. But as I watched it vanish, I realized something else. The Dominion was about to learn our name, and they were not going to like it. Helen was already working on the engines. The station was a broken mess, but some systems were still alive. Power was flickering. But the life support held. The 2 lifeboats were safe and heading toward the colonies. The broken cruiser in front of us was still venting fire. The second cruiser, the spinning one, was trying to stabilize. It was wounded but not dead. I made a decision. I told Helen to get what was left of the station moving. She looked at me like I was crazy. Outposts were not meant to move. They were stations, fixed in place. But we had one small drive unit for minor course changes, and that drive was still alive. I told her to use it. I told her to ram the second cruiser. She did not argue. She just nodded and started working the controls. The 20 of us who remained gathered on the bridge or in the engine room or at the old mining drills we were about to use as weapons one last time. We all knew what was happening. Nobody cried. Nobody ran. A man named George Bennett, who had been our cook for 2 years, brought cups of hot tea up to the bridge. He said if we were going out warm. The station began to move, slowly, painfully. The wounded Vorthen cruiser saw us coming and tried to turn, but its engines were broken. We got closer and closer, and I could see the Vorthen crew inside through the broken parts of their hull. They were huge creatures, 9 feet tall, with 4 arms and heavy armor. They were scrambling. They were panicking. They had never seen a target come back at them. We hit them. The sound, even through the metal of our station, was like a mountain cracking. Our front section buckled and crumpled. Their side tore open. The 2 ships locked together in a slow, terrible embrace, both of us dying. I was thrown across the bridge. My head hit something hard. Blood ran into my eye. When I looked up, Helen was pulling me to my feet. She said the signal went through. Earth heard everything. Every colony heard everything. Every listening post in human space heard everything. They know, Kale, they know what we did. I looked at her and I smiled. It hurt to smile, but I did it anyway. I said, then let us make sure they know one more thing. I dragged myself to the radio. I opened a channel wide, on every frequency we had left. I did not speak in human language. I spoke in the trade language the Dominion used across the galaxy, the language my team had spent 3 years learning from captured signals. I wanted every Vorthen ship in the sector to hear me. I wanted every subject world under the Dominion's rule to hear me. I wanted it all saved and copied and passed from ship to ship until it reached the Vorthen throne itself. I said, this is Commander Cale Brooks of the human species. 3 years ago, you took 4 million of our people on a world called Kepler 9. Today, we took 2 of your warships. This is our first answer. There will be more. You came to our stars thinking you were the strongest thing in the sky. We are here to teach you that you were wrong. We do not kneel. We do not run. We do not forget. We are coming for you. Then I closed the channel. Helen was staring at me. The rest of the crew on the bridge were staring at me. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The station groaned around us, dying slowly. The cruiser we were tangled with was dying too, its lights flickering out one by one. Then George the cook started to laugh. It was a deep, warm laugh, the kind of laugh a man gives when he is not afraid anymore. Helen joined in. Then the others. I laughed too, even though my head was bleeding and my ribs felt broken. We were going to die here, all of us. But we had done something. We had made the first real hit against a force that nobody had hit in 3,000 years. But we did not die. About an hour later, when the station's last lights were flickering and the cold was creeping in, the sky outside our broken windows lit up. 6 ships came out of deep space at full speed. Human ships, Earth Command ships. They had heard our call. They had come the moment they got the signal. The lead ship was a destroyer called the Halford, and its captain was a woman I had served under many years ago. Her name was Margaret Cole, and she was one of the toughest officers in the fleet. The Halford and its sisters finished off the broken cruiser in less than 10 minutes. Then they came to us. They pulled us out of the wreckage, one by one. 20 people walked into the station that morning expecting to die. 20 people walked out. Captain Cole met me on the deck of the Halford. She was older than I remembered, with gray in her dark hair. She looked at me and at my bleeding head and at the burning wreck of my station behind us and at the 2 dead Vorthen cruisers floating in the dark. She did not say hello. She did not say well done. She said only one thing. She said, Cale, Earth has been waiting for someone to do this for 3 years. Command wants to see you. They have a mission. and you are the only person stubborn enough to lead it." I did not ask what the mission was. I already knew. The Vorthen had come to our stars thinking we were small and weak. Today, at a tiny outpost with an old asteroid and 20 people, we had proved them wrong. Tomorrow or next month or next year, we were going to prove it again. And again. And again. Until the word human meant something new across the whole galaxy. Captain Cole led me below decks. Helen walked beside me. The Halford turned and began the long trip back to Earth. Behind us, the ruins of Outpost Haven drifted in the dark, and the two dead giants floated beside it, and a message written in the language of our enemies spread from ship to ship across the stars. The message said, "The humans have come." I spent the flight back to Earth in a small medical bay, while a tired doctor stitched the cut on my forehead and wrapped tape around my broken ribs. Helen sat in the corner with her boots up on a chair, pretending to rest, but I could see she was wide awake. Every time the ship made a small noise, her eyes opened. Neither of us had really slept since the attack. When we landed, there was no parade. There were no cameras. Earth Command wanted the whole thing kept quiet, at least for now. A black car met us at the spaceport and drove us to a building that did not appear on any map. Deep underground, in a room with no windows, I stood in front of a long table where 6 admirals sat in full uniform. At the head of the table was the highest officer in the human fleet, a calm man with silver hair named Admiral Harold Pike. He did not waste time. He looked at me and said one sentence. He said, "Commander Brooks, we are going to hit the Dominion back, and we want you to lead the strike." I sat down slowly because my ribs hurt and because his words hit me harder than the crash had. I had thought they might give me a medal and send me to a desk job. I had not expected this. Admiral Pike explained. For the last 3 years, while the Dominion thought we were hiding and licking our wounds, Earth had been busy. We had built things in secret. Weapons the Vorthen did not know existed. New kinds of ships. And most important of all, we had cracked their codes. We knew where their key targets were. We knew their fleet movements. We had been waiting for an excuse to strike and for a commander who was ready to do it. My fight at the outpost had given them both. He pulled up a star map on the wall. He pointed to a system deep inside Dominion space, far from any human world. He said that system was called Thalun, and it was where the Vorthen built most of their warships. If we could hurt Thalun, we could slow down their whole military for years. It would be the biggest strike against the Dominion in the history of the galaxy. He said it was likely a one-way trip. He asked me if I would take the mission. I did not even pause. I said yes. He nodded as if he had known I would. He said the fleet for the strike would be ready in 6 weeks, 42 ships, 18,000 volunteers. Every one of them would be someone who had lost someone on Kepler 9 or in the smaller attacks since. Every one of them would know what they were signing up for. I would be the strike commander. I would choose my own officers. I would have full authority. I looked at Helen, who was standing by the door. I said, "I want her as my second." Admiral Pike looked at her file on his pad and nodded once. He said, "Done." And that was how it began. The next 6 weeks went by in a blur of training and meetings and late nights. The ships were gathered in a hidden shipyard on the far side of our moon, where the Dominion scouts could not see. I met my captains one by one. There was a tall woman named Diana Ford who commanded the carrier Brightwater. There was a young man named Henry Knox, barely 30, who commanded the destroyer Iron Sparrow. There was an older captain named Samuel Reed, quiet and careful, who would lead our second wave. There were many more. Each of them had a story. Each of them had lost someone. Each of them looked me in the eye and said they were ready. Weapons were what surprised me most. For 3 years, while the Vorthen thought we were beaten, our engineers had been designing tools the enemy could not stop. The Vorthen used only energy weapons. Their shields were built to block light and plasma, but our scientists had gone old school. They built launchers that fired simple metal rods, small as a finger but moving faster than any shield could react to. Just pieces of heavy metal, accelerated to impossible speeds. A Vorthen shield would stop a laser. It would do nothing against a spear of solid metal moving at a fraction of the speed of light. We called them needle rods. Each one could punch a hole through a Vorthen cruiser. We also had small robot ships that flew themselves. They would swarm around an enemy, confusing its targeting, pulling its fire, while our real ships hit the weak spots. And we had a new kind of jump drive that was faster and quieter than anything the Dominion had. They would not hear us coming until we were already on top of them. The day we left Earth, Admiral Pike came to see me off. He walked with me down the long corridor to my flagship, a heavy cruiser named the Sovereign. He did not say much. At the airlock, he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Cale, we have waited 3 years for this. Make it count, and come home if you can." I said I would try. Then I walked onto my ship, and we lifted off, and the 42 ships of the strike fleet gathered in orbit one by one, and we all jumped together into the dark. The trip took 9 days. 9 days of checking systems, of running drills, of eating bad food and trying to sleep. On the last night, I walked the halls of the Sovereign and talked to my crew. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted them to see mine. There was a young gunner named Lucy Wade who showed me a picture of her little sister who had been on Kepler 9. There was an engineer named Frank Bell who had built the needle rods himself in a workshop on Mars and laughed when he told me how simple they were. There was a medic named Grace Hollow who had been a doctor before the war and who said she hoped she would not have much to do. I told them all the same thing. I told them I was proud to fly with them. I told them whatever happened, we had already made history by trying. On the morning of the 10th day, we came out of jump, and Thalun was right in front of us. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Thalun was not a normal planet. It was a huge ring of shipyards built around a small yellow sun, with thousands of warships in various stages of being built inside the ring. Giant frames of metal, half-finished cruisers, dreadnoughts the size of cities, all floating in the warm light of the star. It was the heart of the Dominion's power, and it was, for this one moment, completely unprepared. The Vorthen had stationed a defense fleet around Thalun, of course, 40 big ships, maybe 50. They were huge, far more powerful than ours, but they were sitting quiet, engines cold, crews probably half asleep. Nobody attacked Thalun. Nobody had ever attacked Thalun. The idea was not even in their heads. Helen was at my side. The bridge was silent. Every screen glowed with targets. I took a breath. I gave the order. Fire everything. The first needle rods left our ships at incredible speed, invisible to Vorthen sensors. 4 seconds later, the first Dominion cruiser cracked in half. Then another. Then 3 more. The Vorthen ships, caught cold, tried to power up their shields and found those shields did nothing. They tried to move and found the enemy was everywhere. Their transmissions across the ring became a storm of panic and confusion. They were asking their commanders what to do. The commanders had no answers. The books they had written about war did not include this page. Our small drone ships swept in next, tangling with their fighters, pulling their fire away from our cruisers. Captain Ford's Brightwater launched wave after wave of them. Captain Knox's Iron Sparrow dove straight into a gap in their line, firing from every angle. Old Captain Reed held our second wave in reserve, ready to plug any hole. The battle did not last an hour. It lasted 3 days. The Vorthen defense fleet, for all its size, began to fall apart within the first 12 hours. Their commanders called for help and help came, but the help arrived in pieces. 1 squadron here, 2 cruisers there. We picked them off as they came in. Every time a Dominion ship jumped in, a cloud of needle rods was already waiting for it. The hardest part was the shipyard itself. The ring had its own defenses, automated cannons and old shield grids, and it had something I had not expected. It had workers. Millions of workers, many of them slaves from other species the Dominion had conquered long ago. I ordered the fleet to target only the military parts of the ring, the half-built warships, the weapon forges, the power cores. I did not want to hurt the workers if we could help it. Many of them, once they saw what was happening, did something remarkable. They began to sabotage the yards themselves. They shut down power grids. They opened airlocks. They sent us signals about where to aim and where not to. On the second day, I realized something that turned my cold, quiet feeling into something like hope. The slaves of the Dominion had been waiting for this moment for 1,000 years. They had been waiting for anyone to come, and we were the first. On the third day, the great shipyards of Thaloon were a ruin. The half-built dreadnoughts were melted slag. The weapon forges were cold and dark. Most of the defense fleet was gone. The rest had fled into deep space. We had lost 13 of our 42 ships. We had lost more than 6,000 of our own. One of them was Captain Knox of the Iron Sparrow, who took his ship right into the side of a Vorthan dreadnought to stop it from jumping away with news of our attack. I did not know him well, but I will remember him for the rest of my life. As the battle ended, the survivors of the slave workforce sent us a message. A small, quiet message from one of the ring's outer stations. It was in simple trade language. It said only, "Thank you. Please do not leave." I looked at Helen. She had a burn on her arm and dark shadows under her eyes, but she was grinning. I said, "We cannot stay here, but we can do something better. We can make sure the Dominion can never do this to anyone ever again." We gathered the slaves who wanted to leave, many thousands of them. We had room on our ships for most of them. The rest we gave working escape pods and pointed them toward neutral space. We took the memory cores of the ring before we left, every record of every fleet movement, every secret base, every code word. And then, before we jumped away, I had one more thing to do. I opened a wide signal. Every ship in that sector, every Dominion world within range, every secret military base would hear it. I spoke in their own trade language again. I said, "This is Strike Commander Cale Brooks of the human species. 3 years ago, you attacked our colony at Kepler 9. Today, we have destroyed the shipyards of Thaloon. Your dreadnoughts will not be built this year. Your forges are dark. Your workers are free. To every species living under the Dominion, listen to me. You are not alone anymore. We are coming. And to the Vorthan throne itself, hear this. You taught the galaxy that only strength is respected. We have come to teach you what real strength looks like." Then I closed the channel and we jumped. The trip back was longer than the trip there because we had so many ships damaged and so many new passengers. But nobody complained. Every free soul on those ships, human and alien alike, knew something huge had just happened. When we finally reached the hidden base Admiral Pike had set up for us in the Shattered Reach, the nebula at the edge of Dominion space, the first thing we saw was the Admiral himself, waiting for us at the dock. He looked at our battered ships. He looked at the thousands of freed beings we had brought out of slavery. He looked at me. He did not salute. He put his hand on my shoulder the way he had when I left Earth. His eyes were wet. He said, "Son, you have no idea what you just started." I looked out at the nebula, glowing soft and red in the dark. I thought about the long war ahead. I thought about the slaves of 1,000 worlds waiting to hear our name. I thought about the Vorthan throne, far away, just now learning that their forges were ash. I said, "I think I do, sir. I think I am finally starting to." The Shattered Reach was the perfect hiding place. It was a huge cloud of red and purple gas, many light years across, full of broken asteroids and dead stars. No proper sensor could see far inside it. The Dominion had written it off as worthless centuries ago. They called it the Empty Edge. Now it was our home, and they did not know it. We set up a base on a large asteroid in the heart of the cloud. Admiral Pike's engineers had been working on it for 6 months. It was not much. A few hangars carved into the rock, a small command post, a medical center, but it was ours and it was hidden. We called the base Far Harbor. The freed beings we had brought out of Thaloon changed everything. There were about 4,000 of them, many different species, some I had never seen before. The largest group were the Nuvi, a gentle, frog-like people with soft, wet skin and wide, sad eyes. They had been slaves for 800 years. Their homeworld had been conquered so long ago that most of them did not remember it, only the stories their grandparents told. There were also the Kesari, tall and thin with long arms and clever hands, who had worked the weapon forges. There were the Boer, short and heavy, who had been used as miners. There were dozens of others, smaller groups, each with their own story. On the first day at Far Harbor, I met their leaders in our small meeting room. The Nuvei elder, a wise old one named Tella, spoke for them all. She used a small translator box that Helen had rigged up for her. Her voice, filtered through the box, was soft but clear. She said, "Human commander, for 1,000 years our peoples have whispered to each other in the dark. We have told our children that one day something would come, something that could hurt the masters. We did not know what it would be. We did not think it would be a species so new to the stars, but here you are. And we have waited a long time and we do not want to wait anymore. Tell us what to do. Tell us how to help. Our peoples will rise if you say the word." I sat with that for a long moment. I was a soldier. I had trained all my life to command ships and win battles. I had not trained to answer questions like this. The Nuvei elder was not asking me for orders. She was asking me for a promise. She was asking me to say that if her people rose up against the Dominion across the galaxy, we would not leave them alone. I looked at Helen. She nodded. I looked at Tella. I said, "Elder, I cannot make this promise for all of humanity. I am only one commander, but I can make it for myself and for this fleet and for every human under my command. If your peoples rise, we will fight beside you. We will not leave you alone. We will not make a peace with the Dominion that leaves your worlds in their hands. You have my word." Tella closed her wet eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was something in them I had not seen before. It was hope, real hope. She said, "Then we will rise." Over the next 3 months, the war changed shape. The freed workers of Thalun carried our message back to their homeworlds through secret networks that had been waiting for this moment for centuries. On 7 Dominion worlds within 30 days, the slaves rose up. They took over power plants. They cut communication lines. They attacked the governor's palaces. The Dominion, already shaken by the loss of Thalun, now had a dozen fires burning across its territory. They could not focus on any one fight. They had to send ships everywhere at once. And while they were busy with the fires, we struck again. Our second target was a Dominion communication relay at a system called Orathas. It was a huge station that carried fleet orders from the Vorthan throne to the outer territories. Without it, the Dominion's armies could not coordinate. We hit it with 20 ships and a plan Helen had designed herself. The plan used our new jump drives to drop needle rod launchers right on top of the relay before the defenders even knew we were there. In less than an hour, Orathas was a cloud of broken metal. Our third strike was at a mining world called Bell 14, where the Dominion collected the special metal they used to build their living armor. We did not destroy the mines. We took them. We freed the slaves who worked there, we set up a defensive line, and we kept pumping metal out of the ground. Only now, that metal went to our shipyards, not theirs. After 3 months, the galactic map had changed in ways nobody could have imagined a year earlier. Earth Command, seeing what we had done, committed more ships. 200 more warships arrived at Far Harbor over the next 60 days. Volunteers from human colonies poured in. The free signatories, as Tella's people began to call our alliance, grew to include 12 species. We were no longer a single fleet on a raid. We were the start of something much bigger. But the Dominion was not idle. They were confused, yes. They were shaken, but they were not broken, far from it. One afternoon, Helen came to my office with a face I had not seen her wear before. She closed the door behind her. She put a pad on my desk. She said, "Sir, you need to see this. It is from a defector." The defector was a Vorthan. His name was Vel. He was not a warrior. He was a scholar, one of the Vorthan caste that kept records and wrote histories. He had escaped from the Dominion through a network of Nuvei smugglers and had asked to meet a human commander. He had brought information. I went to meet him in a small room at the edge of our base. He was 7 feet tall, smaller than a warrior but still huge by human standards. His skin was pale gray, and his forearms ended in delicate, long fingers. He wore simple robes. He looked tired in a way I recognized. It was the same tiredness I saw in the mirror. He spoke through a translator. His voice was surprisingly soft. He said, "Commander, I need to tell you the truth about Kepler-9." I felt my hands go cold. I sat down slowly. He said, "The attack on your colony was not a mistake. It was not a random act of cruelty. It was a test. The Vorthan High Council had been watching your species for years. They saw how fast you were spreading among the stars. They saw your technology improving. They made a decision. They decided to strike a colony and see what you would do. If you bowed, if you begged for peace, they would let your species live as subjects. If you fought back, they would burn your homeworld next." My throat felt dry. I said, "They were testing us." He said, "Yes. And they were afraid, Commander. They have been afraid of your species for a long time. The High Council saw something in human history, in the records your ships carry through space, that scared them. Your people have fought wars before. Your people have survived against impossible odds before. Your people are, in the view of the Dominion, the most dangerous species they have ever found. They wanted to see if they could frighten you into submission before you grew strong enough to hurt them." I thought about Daniel, my brother, and his fruit trees. I thought about Oliver Finch, who was 19. I thought about 4 million lives on a warm world that had never hurt anyone. It had been a test. I did not shout. I did not throw anything. I just sat there and let the cold thing inside me grow a little deeper, a little quieter. I had thought I could not hate the Dominion more than I already did. I had been wrong. Vel watched me carefully. He said, "Commander, I did not come here to hurt you with this truth. I came because I believe the Dominion is a sickness and I want to help cure it. My caste has seen the suffering it has caused. We have been silent for too long. I have records. I have names. I have the locations of every secret base. I have the Empress's private communications. Everything." I looked at him. I said, "Why should I trust you?" He reached into his robe and placed something on the table. It was a small data crystal. He said, "Because I have brought you this. It is the personal log of the captain who gave the order to burn Kepler-9. It contains his confession. He is still alive. He lives on a world called Rithais. I came here to help you find him. I came here to help you find all of them." I took the crystal. I said, "Thank you. What do you want in return?" He said, "Only one thing. When the Dominion falls, remember that not all Vorthans wanted it. Some of us tried to help. Some of us were also prisoners." I nodded. I said, "You have my word." He became a part of our team that day. He gave us information worth 1,000 battles. With his help, we mapped the Dominion's entire military structure. We learned which commanders were cruel and which were tired. We learned which worlds would rise if we struck nearby. We learned the name of every ship and every officer involved in Kepler-9. Over the next 2 months, we made another 12 strikes across Dominion space. Everyone was precise. Everyone hurt. A supply base here. A fleet staging area there. A prison world where we freed 40,000 slaves in a single night. And yet, for all our success, I could feel the shape of something huge coming. The Dominion could not keep losing this way without answering. An empire that had ruled for 3,000 years did not simply fall apart. Somewhere in the dark heart of Vorthan space, the High Throne was gathering its real strength, preparing its real answer. That answer came on a cold morning at Far Harbor. I was in my office reading reports when Helen burst in. Her face was white. She said, "Sir, we just lost contact with Earth." I stood up. My coffee spilled across the desk. I did not notice. I said, "What do you mean, lost contact?" She said, "A transmission came in, then nothing. Sir, we think the Dominion just hit human space. They have sent a fleet, a large one. We do not know how large. Admiral Pike is asking all free human forces to return home immediately." I went very still. I had expected this. I had known for months that it was coming. And yet, knowing a thing is coming is not the same as feeling it arrive. Somewhere across the stars, my homeworld was under attack. My people were dying, and I was on the other side of the galaxy, beyond any hope of helping them in time. I looked at Helen. I said, gather the command staff, all of them, tell it too. We have a decision to make and we have to make it now. 30 minutes later, we stood around the main table in our command room. Captain Ford of the Brightwater, old Captain Reed, Vel the Vorthan Scholar, Tella of the Nuvi, Admiral Pike's second officer, a serious woman named Margaret Gray, and a dozen others. I laid out the choice. I said we have two paths. Path 1, we break off every offensive operation, we gather every ship we have, and we race home to defend Earth. That is what my heart says to do. That is what every human here will want to do. I paused, the room was quiet. I said, Path 2 is harder. We do not go home. We push the attack harder than ever. We hit the Dominion in places that matter so much that they have to pull their forces back from human space to defend themselves. We trust that Earth can hold long enough for us to make that happen, and we accept that if we are wrong, we may lose our homeworld while we are far away trying to save it. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Tella stepped forward. Her wide, wet eyes were steady. She said, Commander, if you go home, the rising across the Dominion will collapse. 30 species are in revolt because you promised you would not leave them alone. If you break that promise, even to save your own world, the Dominion will crush them all. Millions will die. And when you come back, if you come back, there will be no one left to help you. Vel said, and if you stay, Commander, I can tell you where to strike. I can give you targets that the Empress cannot afford to lose. I know which worlds are guarded by her personal fleets. If we hit those, she will have to choose. Defend her crown or destroy Earth. She cannot do both. Captain Ford said, Sir, my ship will go wherever you order. Old Captain Reed said, Mine too. Margaret Gray said, Admiral Pike ordered us to come home, but I have known the Admiral for 20 years. I think if he knew what Vel knows, he would give a different order. I think we should stay. I looked around the table. I thought about Earth. I thought about the blue sky over the city where I had been born. I thought about my mother, who still lived in a small house on the coast. I thought about everyone who had sent me out here with hope in their eyes. Then I thought about Tella, and the 1,000 years of waiting in the dark, and the promise I had made. I said we stay. The room let out a single long breath. I said we hit harder than ever. Vel, I want your target list. Tella, I want every free signatory's ship we can gather. Helen, send one message to Earth. Tell them we will not be coming home. Tell them we will save them another way. Helen nodded. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was firm. She said, Yes, sir. We got to work. We had 72 hours before the Vorthan attack on Earth would reach the heart of the solar system. 72 hours to change the whole war. 72 hours to prove that the hardest choice was the right one. I stood at the window of my office, looking out at the red glow of the nebula, and I made a quiet promise to my mother and to everyone I loved back home. I said, I am coming back to you. But first, I have to finish what I started. And when it is done, the sky over your head will be safe for the rest of your life. The nebula glowed on, and the fleet began to move. The next 72 hours were the longest of my life. Every commander in the Free Signatories fleet was called to action. We had almost 600 ships now, a mix of human warships, captured Dominion cruisers that Kasari engineers had rebuilt for us, and strange alien vessels of designs I had never seen before. It was not a neat fleet. It looked, from the outside, like a mess. But every captain in that mess was someone who had chosen to be there, and they followed orders without question. Vel spread his target list on the main table. He said there are 3 worlds the Empress cannot lose. Each of them holds something that keeps her empire alive. The first is a world called Dresden. It holds the master archives of the Dominion. every record of every conquest, every treaty, every secret agreement for 3,000 years. If Dresden falls, the Empress loses her hold on half her subject worlds, because she loses the proof of the old deals that bind them to her. The second is a world called Coral. It is where the High Council lives, not the Empress herself, but the 100 lords who serve her. If we hit Coral, the Dominion's government will fall into confusion. Every governor across the galaxy will start wondering who to listen to. The third is Kaon. Kaon is the Empress's personal shipyard built in secret 10 years ago. It holds her private fleet, the ships she would use if everything else fell apart. If we destroy Kaon, she has no escape. She cannot run. She cannot reinforce. She is trapped on her throne world. I looked at the 3 worlds on the map. They were spread far apart across Dominion space. Hitting all 3 at once would split our forces very thin. I said we hit all 3, today. At the same time. Captain Ford, you take 200 ships to Dresden. Old Reed, you take 200 to Coral. I will lead the strike on Kaon myself. Helen started to say something. I knew what she was going to say. She was going to ask to come with me. Kaon would be the most dangerous target because the Empress would be watching it personally. I raised my hand before she could speak. I said, Helen, I need you at Far Harbor. If something goes wrong at any of the 3 targets, you need to be the one who decides what happens next. I trust you more than anyone. Do this for me, please. She did not like it, but she nodded. 6 hours later, the 3 fleets jumped. I will tell you what happened at each target in turn, though I was only at one of them. At Dresden, Captain Ford's fleet came out of jump on the dark side of the planet and hit the defense ring before the Vorthan guards could get their shields up. The defense fleet was smaller than we expected. Many of the Empress's ships had been pulled to Earth. Within 6 hours, Dresden's great archive was in free signatories' hands. Captain Ford did not destroy it. She took it. Every record, every data crystal, every old treaty. They were loaded onto our ships and sent to Far Harbor. The Empress had lost her history. More important, we now had the proof to free every subject world that had been bound to her by old lies. At Coral, old Captain Reed's fleet had a harder fight. The High Council's personal guard was large and well prepared. They had been expecting an attack ever since the fall of Thalun. The fighting lasted a full day. Reed lost 40 ships and took heavy damage to his own flagship, but in the end the Council world fell. Most of the lords were captured alive. A few fled in private yachts. The Dominion's government stopped functioning that day. Across the galaxy, governors stopped receiving orders. The Empire's nervous system had been cut. And at Kaon, I led 300 ships into the most dangerous fight of my life. The Empress had built her secret shipyard in an asteroid field around a dying red star, thinking no one would ever find it. Vel had found it. When we came out of jump, we saw it for the first time. It was smaller than Thalun, but the ships inside it were different. These were her personal warships, made with care, built to the highest standards of Vorthan engineering. 40 huge vessels, each more powerful than anything I had faced before, and they were crewed and ready. The battle began the moment we came out of jump. The Empress's ships fought in a way the regular Dominion fleet did not. They were smart. They moved in coordinated groups. Their weapons were faster, their shields stronger. I lost 8 ships in the first 10 minutes. I ordered my fleet to spread out. I ordered the needle rod ships to focus on one enemy at a time. I ordered the drone swarms to confuse their sensors. Slowly, we began to pull ahead. In the middle of the fight, a signal came through from the largest Vorthan ship. It was the Empress herself. I had never seen her before. She appeared on my main screen. She was huge, even for a Vorthan over 10 feet tall. She wore robes of black and gold. Her skin was silver white. Her eyes were the color of cold metal. She looked at me, a small human in a battered command chair, and she spoke in perfect trade language. She said, Commander Brooks, we know your name, we know what you have done. I am offering you one chance. Stop this attack. Withdraw, tell your people on Earth to surrender. and I will spare your homeworld. You have my word as Empress of the Dominion. Refuse, and I will burn every city on your planet." The bridge of the sovereign was very quiet. I looked at her image. I thought about my mother's house on the coast. I thought about all the people I knew on Earth. I thought about Daniel, who was already gone. Then I thought about Tella, who had been a slave for 800 years. I thought about the Nuvi children, who had never seen their own homeworld. I thought about the 4,000 freed workers of Thalun, and the 12 species in revolt, and the 10,000 more who were waiting for us to finish what we started. And I thought about something Vel had told me, months ago, in a quiet room at Far Harbor. He had said, "Commander, empires do not beg. Empires demand. When an empire offers you mercy, it is because it has already run the numbers, and it knows it will cost more to keep fighting than to make a deal. She will only offer mercy if she is already losing." I looked at the Empress. I smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. I said, "Your Majesty, I have a counteroffer. You surrender. You release every slave world in your empire. You lay down your weapons. You return to your homeworld and live out the rest of your days in peace. Do that, and I will spare your life. Refuse and this fleet and every other free fleet in the galaxy will come to your throne and take it from you." Her silver-white face did not move, but something shifted in her metal eyes. She said, "You cannot win." I said, "We have already won. You just have not noticed yet. Your shipyards are gone. Your council is in our hands. Your history is on our servers. Your fleet is splitting in every direction, trying to put out fires it cannot reach. And I am here at your secret shipyard with 300 ships about to take your last safe harbor. You are the one who cannot win. The math has already happened. All that is left is the choice of how it ends." She stared at me for a long moment. Then the screen went black. She had cut the signal. I understood what that meant. She was not going to surrender. She was going to fight. I turned to my crew. I said, "All ships full attack. No more talking." We finished Kaon over the next 6 hours. The Empress's personal fleet was destroyed. Her secret shipyards were broken. Her private flagship tried to jump away, and my gunners caught it with needle rods before it could finish powering its drive. The ship split in half. I do not know if she was still on board. She may have transferred to a smaller vessel and escaped. When the last Vorthan ship stopped firing, we stood alone in that empty system, around a dying red star. My flagship was bleeding air from a dozen holes. A third of my fleet was gone, but we had done it. I sent a message to Helen. I said, "Kaon is finished. Tell Tella, tell the galaxy." Helen's voice came back, tired but happy. She said, "Sir, Dresden and Coral are also finished. All 3 targets fell in the same 12 hours. And sir, we just got a signal from Earth." I sat up straighter. I said, "Tell me." She said, "The Vorthan fleet that was attacking Earth has broken off. They received orders to return to Dominion space to defend their own worlds. Earth reports heavy damage, but the planet is intact. Admiral Pike sent a personal message. He said to tell you, you crazy, wonderful idiot, you were right." I laughed until my ribs hurt. Helen laughed too. Then she said, "Sir, one more thing. The Empress has sent a signal to every Dominion world. She is calling for a final stand at her throne world, Korath. Every loyal Vorthan ship in the galaxy is ordered to come there. She is gathering everything she has left. She wants one last battle." I stopped laughing. I said, "How much does she have left?" Helen said, "Our estimates put it at 800 ships, maybe more, all of them big, all of them bringing their best commanders." I looked at my broken fleet. 200 ships, many of them damaged. I looked at Captain Ford's fleet at Dresden and Old Reed's fleet at Coral. Together, if we all gathered, we would have maybe 600 ships, fewer than the Empress. But we had the free signatories. We had 12 species in revolt. We had a galaxy waking up. I thought for a moment, then I made the call. I said, "Helen, send the word to every free signatory's world. Every ship, every volunteer, every being who wants to see the end of the Dominion. Tell them to come to the edge of the Korath system. Tell them to come now. I said, we are going to finish this. Helen said, yes, sir. And sir, where should I tell them to meet? I looked at the main screen, at the broken red star and the scattered wreckage of the Empress's last safe place. I said, tell them to gather at a point just outside Korath's last jump boundary. We will call it Dawn Gate, because after this, whatever comes next, the sun is finally going to rise for all of them. Helen sent the word. Over the next 9 days, the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever seen gathered at Dawn Gate. Ships came from every corner of Dominion space. Human destroyers from Earth, sent at last by Admiral Pike now that Earth was safe. Nuvi water ships, slow but strong. Kesari cruisers built in secret in caves under their homeworld. Small fighters flown by species I had never met, who had heard our call and traveled for weeks to join us. By the 9th day, we had more than 3,000 ships. I stood on the bridge of the Sovereign, looking at the fleet through the main screen. It filled the space around us, ships of every shape and size, every color, every design. 3,000. Every one of them had come because of a promise I had made. Every one of them was about to follow me into the greatest fight any of us would ever see. Helen stood beside me. She had come from Far Harbor on a fast ship because she refused to miss the final battle. I had not had the heart to say no. She said, sir, the fleet is ready. Tella is on the forward command ship. Vel is with us on the Sovereign. Every captain knows the plan. What are your orders? I looked at the stars. I thought about the road that had brought me here. The red light on my console at Outpost Haven, Daniel's fruit trees, Oliver Finch at 19, Marcus playing guitar, George the cook bringing tea, Captain Ford and Captain Reed and Captain Knox who had not lived to see this day, the slaves of Thalun, Tella's hope, Vel's confession, the Empress's cold metal eyes. I thought about all of it. Then I pressed the command key. I said, all ships, this is Strike Commander Brooks. We have come a long way together. Today we bring this to an end. Jump on my mark. The fleet began to glow as 3,000 jump drives warmed up together. I said, mark. And we jumped into the Korath system, and the sky ahead of us was full of the Empress's last warships, and the final battle began. The Korath system was a beautiful place. 3 suns, all of them yellow, all of them warm, a dozen planets. At the center, a huge blue world covered in cities of white stone. That was Korath Prime, the throne world of the Vorthan Dominion, the capital of an empire 3,000 years old. In orbit around it and filling the space between the suns were the Empress's last warships, 800 of them, more than I had feared, everyone enormous, everyone crewed by the most loyal Vorthan in the galaxy. They had formed a great wall of metal and energy, and they were waiting for us. The moment we came out of jump, they opened fire. I will not try to describe the first hour of the battle, because no words can hold it. Space itself seemed to burn. Beams and missiles and rods crossed in every direction. Ships broke apart and scattered. Small fighters swarmed like birds. On every frequency, in every language, commanders shouted orders and crews called for help and weapons officers reported hits. My ears rang. My eyes watered. My hands on the command controls were steady because they had no choice. We were outnumbered almost 3-to-1 in ship mass, but we had things they did not. We had 3,000 crews who had chosen to be there. We had needle rods their shields still could not stop. We had drones and smart sabotage, and 60 years of human stubbornness all wrapped into 42 heavy cruisers. Most of all, we had something the Vorthan had never had in 3,000 years. We had nothing to lose. Captain Ford, her Brightwater now repaired and angry, punched a hole through the enemy line in the 3rd hour. Old Reed, with the survivors of Coral, circled around from below and hit them from behind. Tella's Nuvi ships, slow but strong, anchored our center and refused to move, no matter how hard the enemy pushed. Vel from my bridge called out targets. He had served in the Vorthan Scholar caste for many years, and he knew which ships carried the most important officers. We aimed for those first. By the 12th hour, the Empress's great wall had cracks in it. By the 24th, the cracks had become gaps. By the 36th, half her fleet was gone. But we had paid too. I had lost more than 1,000 ships. Old Reed was dead, his flagship broken by a lucky hit. Captain Ford was alive but badly hurt. Many free signatories' captains I had known only by name were also gone. It was a terrible price. And still, we kept pushing. On the third day, I gave the order that would end it. I said, prepare the landing force. This was the part of the plan only a few of us knew. Helen, Vel, Tella, a handful of others. While the fleet was fighting, we had been moving a small, hidden group of ships around the edge of the system through the dust and the shadows toward Korath Prime itself. A boarding fleet, 20 small ships, each carrying a team of the best soldiers from each species in our alliance. My team: humans, Nuvi, Kesari, Boar, and others. Our plan was to land on the throne world itself, in the heart of the Empress's capital, and take her palace. It was not going to be easy. The Empress had a personal guard of 5,000 warriors, each one the size of an elephant. The palace was built into a mountain. The defenses were old and strong. But we had help. As our boarding fleet dropped toward Korath Prime, messages began to come in from the surface. Nuvi slaves who had worked in the palace for generations were opening doors. Kesari traders who had kept their networks alive in the capital for centuries were cutting communication lines. Boar miners who had dug the very mountain the palace sat on were collapsing tunnels under the guard barracks. The common people of Korath Prime, who had lived in fear of their Empress for their whole lives, were not fighting us. Many of them were helping us. Our ships landed in the great courtyard of the palace at sunset on the third day. I stepped out onto the white stone. The air smelled of flowers. The three suns were setting together, painting the sky gold and red and purple. It was the most beautiful evening I had ever seen. And in the middle of it, I was walking up the steps of the oldest and cruelest palace in the galaxy. The fight through the palace was long and hard. My team lost good people. A young Kesari warrior named Lin fell on the 5th floor. A Nuvi guard named Oro fell on the 7th. A human soldier named David Hart, who had been my bodyguard since Far Harbor, took a hit on the 9th floor that he did not come back from. I did not have time to grieve. I kept moving. At the top of the palace, in a great hall of white stone and silver, I found the Empress. She was alone. She was sitting on a low seat, not her throne. Her black and gold robes were dusty. A thin cut ran across her silver-white face. She had a weapon on her belt, but her hands were in her lap. She looked smaller than I remembered. I entered the hall. Helen was beside me. Vel was behind me. Tella came last, slow on her old legs, but refusing to miss this moment. The Empress looked up. Her cold metal eyes found mine. She said, "Commander Brooks, you came." I said I would. For a long moment she did not speak. Then she said, "Do you know how old I am?" I said, "I do not." She said, "I am 412 years old. I have ruled this empire for 190 years. My mother ruled for 200 before me, and her mother for 300 before that. My line has held this throne for more than 1,000 years, and today you have come to end it." I said, "Yes." She said, "May I ask why?" I stared at her. I had not expected a question. I had expected a fight or a final trick or at least defiance. But she was sitting in her chair, waiting, and looking at me as if she really wanted to know. I said, "Your Majesty, you asked me that same question months ago from the bridge of your flagship at Kaon. I will give you the same answer I gave then. You taught the galaxy that only strength matters, that mercy is something empires give when they feel like giving it. We came to teach you a different lesson. We came to teach you that kindness is something species take for themselves when they decide the fear is not worth it anymore." I said, you burned Kepler-9 to see if we would kneel. You did not expect us to stand. You did not expect us to make other species stand with us. You did not expect the galaxy to be ready after 3,000 years to be done with you. But it was ready. We just gave it the sign it was waiting for. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something I did not expect. She took the weapon from her belt. She set it on the floor. She stood up slowly and she walked toward me and she knelt on the white stone. She said, I surrender. To you, to the free signatories, and to the galaxy. I ask only that you be kind to my people. Most of them had no voice in the empire I built. They were afraid, as so many were afraid. End the dominion. Let a new thing grow, but do not repeat my mistake. Do not teach them to fear you as they once feared me. I looked down at her. I thought of Daniel. I thought of 4 million people on Kepler-9. I thought of the long, cold years of anger that had brought me here. And I thought of Tella, who stood behind me now, with tears in her wide, wet eyes. I said, Your Majesty, you have my word. The next morning, from the balcony of the palace, we sent a message to every world in the former dominion. The Empress stood beside me as we did it. Her voice was steady. She announced her surrender. She called for every dominion ship still fighting to stand down. She thanked those who had served her and asked them to serve the new order with the same loyalty. Across the galaxy, fleets put down their weapons. Across the galaxy, people walked out of their homes for the first time in 3,000 years and looked up at a sky that did not belong to anyone but themselves. In the months that followed, we built something new. It was not a human empire that was important to me. I had seen what empires did, and I had no interest in building another one with a different flag. What we built was a kind of agreement, a council of species with no one species above the others. Each world could govern itself. Each species could keep its own customs, but we all agreed on a few simple things. No slavery ever again, no planet-destroying weapons, no secret wars. Disputes between species would be settled by the council, not by fleets. We called it the Stellar Concord. Tella became its first speaker. Vel served as its first historian. I was offered the position of commander of the Concord's defense fleet. I turned it down. I had done enough commanding for one lifetime. I stayed on only long enough to train my replacement, a young woman named Sophia Lane who had flown drones at Kayan and had shown more courage than any officer I had ever seen. When she was ready, I stepped aside. Helen married a man she had met on Far Harbor, an engineer from a colony I had never visited. She retired from the fleet and opened a school for young pilots from every species in the Concord. She sends me letters still, every month. She says her favorite students are the Nuvi because they are patient and the Kesari because they are clever. Vel went home to his homeworld and wrote the true history of the Dominion. It took him 6 years. When it was done, he sent me a copy. I keep it on a shelf in my office. The Empress lived out the rest of her days on a small island on her homeworld. She was not harmed. She was not humiliated. She was simply left alone as she had asked. I visited her once 2 years after the war. She was sitting in a garden watching the 3 suns set. She did not say much. I did not say much either. Before I left, she looked up at me and said, Commander, thank you for keeping your word. I said, Your Majesty. Thank you for keeping yours. As for me, I went home. Kepler-9 had been made green again. It took 4 years of hard work by Nuvi terraforming teams. They had insisted on doing it themselves as a gift to humanity in thanks for the promise I had kept. The day I arrived on the new Kepler-9, there were forests again and small rivers and young trees everywhere. I walked through the valley where Daniel had planted his fruit orchard. The orchard was gone, but in its place, the Nuvi had planted a new one. The trees were young, but they were growing well. I planted one more tree myself, a small apple sapling in the spot where my brother's cabin had stood. I did not cry. I had done all my crying in the years before. I just stood there for a long time in the warm afternoon light, and I thought about him. A few years after that, a young Nuvi girl visited me on Kepler-9. She had been born after the war. She had never known the Dominion. She had read about me in her history lessons, and she had come a long way to ask me one question. She said, "Mr. Brooks, my teacher says that humans are the bravest species in the galaxy. Is that true?" I thought about it. I thought about all the species who had stood with us. The Nuvi who held the center line at Korath, the Kesari who had built our weapons in secret, the Boar who had collapsed the tunnels under the palace, Vel, who had walked away from everything he had ever known because he thought it was wrong, Tella, who had kept hope alive for 1,000 years. I smiled at the young Nuve girl. I said, "No, I do not think humans are the bravest. I think we were simply the first to forget for a little while how strong the rest of you were. The rest of you remembered. And when we did the first loud thing, you all did the next loud thing with us. That is how the Dominion ended, not because humans were special, because everyone together finally decided that enough was enough." She nodded slowly, as if she was going to remember it. Then she asked me one more thing. She said, "Are you happy, Mr. Brooks?" I thought about that too. I thought about the long years of war and the friends I had lost and the cold thing that had lived inside me for so long. Then I looked at the green hills of Kepler 9 and at the apple sapling growing by my hand and at the bright afternoon sky of a world that was safe forever. I said, "Yes, I am happy." And it was true. Behind us, the 3 sons of Korath had long since stopped being the center of anything. Ahead of